It is December 28th, 2001. I'm talking with Clark and Elaine Weissman.
Hello?
Hello, is this Clark Weissman?
Yes.
Clark, this is Michael Scully in Austin, Texas.
Michael.
I was wondering, did you get my Christmas email?
Excuse me?
Did you get my Christmas email designating this time to chat with you? You sound like you might not have.
No, I think I did, but I didn't write it down.
Okay, that's fine. Well, I wanted to know if this was a good time for you and Elaine to talk per our earlier exchanges.
Yeah, she's out shopping,
Okay.
so all you got is me.
You want to talk?
Why not?
Okay, that's fine. Let me tell you what I have specific interests. So let me tell you what they are, and if you have any questions of me before we get going, we can do that. I chatted with you guys, as you might recall, in the last Focal Alliance conference. I'm saying, where was it? Vancouver, I guess. And as I got back here and I started working on things, I found myself writing about that period of time, sort of before you guys started the Focal Alliance in Malibu, which is what I sat down to write about, which is what I was leading up to. But I decided I wanted to create some context and talk about the end of the Great Boom and activity that was going on throughout the 70s. And I said, I should use as an example CTMS, and CTMS is, was the source of the alliance ultimately. And I really wanted to talk to you specifically then about the period of the 1970s, because we never touched on that. So I don't know how much your memories are, but I am interested in what activists in the folk music world, how they were keeping active once the Great Boom ended. And you obviously were very active because you ended up founding this society in 1978. But I'm really interested in what led up to your founding of the society and your goals at that time. Some of this I have from the website, but it's always better to hear from a person.
Well, let me share.
Okay.
I grew up in New York City,
Mm-hmm.
and when I was 13, my brother gave me a guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my brother was a photographer, and he's about 4 years older than I.
Okay.
And he used to go downtown, and he went to school at Stuyvesant High School
Okay.
in Manhattan.
Right.
And through Stuyvesant, he knew a number of people who lived in Manhattan, and through them, he got associated with Ethical Culture, which is probably still on Central Park West.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm familiar with all these landmarks since I grew up in New York City.
Okay, well then,
So this is all coming together for me.
and he he used to travel around in the Ethical Culture crowd. Not
Mm-hmm.
that he was interested in it as a religion; it was a social event for him.
Okay.
And he was the guy who played the camera while everybody else played instruments.
Okay.
So he knew a lot of the old timers, and and he got one of them to help him buy a guitar for me.
Okay.
It took me until I was about 16 to learn to tune it,
Okay.
and so I really didn't have much opportunity.
Can you date yourself if you're willing and tell me what year we're in now so I can place this against other events?
Okay. I graduated from Stuyvesant myself in 1952.
Oh, okay. So we're around
So we're in
the early 50-52 range.
in
Yeah.
the early 50s.
Right. Okay.
And through my brother's connection, I went down to Ethical Culture and met a crowd of people down there, and romanced a few young ladies who played the guitar, and I learned to tune it.
Right.
So that got me started. at Stuyvesant, there was a signal event that the number of us decided to form a string and frets club.
Mm-hmm.
And in those days, Stuyvesant was split days. So freshman and sophomore went to school from like 1 o'clock until 5. So
Right.
we had the mornings free.
Mm-hmm.
So we formed the String and Frets Club in the morning.
Okay.
And one of the guys who I taught a few chords lived in Manhattan. And he and I kind of became lifelong friends. But the guy was incredible. And he passed away about 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But his name was Dick Rosmini,
Okay, I know the name.
who was
Yeah.
one of the most incredible stringed instrument players. And he came out to California independent of me, and he basically was a recording instrumentalist. He backed most singers and groups and so forth, and we befriended each other again. But I always took pride that I taught him one of his first chords. So there was still life going on in folk music in those days. Pete Seeger was very popular, and the Weavers were popular, and so forth.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And through the people I met at Ethical Culture, I started to learn songs and play the guitar more and more. There was a very active square dance community in New York around that time.
Okay.
There was square dancing going on in the Village at one of the settlement houses. Can't
Mhm.
remember the name anymore. There was always the jams that Pete Seeger would show up occasionally out at the park in don't even remember the name, with the arch, the triumph.
Washington Square.
Yeah, Washington Square.
Mm-hmm.
And that every Sunday afternoon there was hundreds of musicians
Right.
jamming along there. But I wasn't greatly associated with that. I got more associated with the dance community in New York. There turned out to be a very active square dance community, and they used to meet on the east side of New York,
Mm-hmm.
around the 50s or 60s at a church on Saturday night.
Now, this wasn't Margot Mayo's group, was it?
I can't remember.
Okay. Okay.
You may have better date on it. But the thing that was exciting about it is they had an open band,
Okay.
so anybody with an instrument could play, and they had callers, at least 2 who called during the evening. But it became the magnet for anybody who was interested in dance and so forth, and people would be introduced, and they would get up and call a couple sets. And they did something that to this day just burns in my memory. The final dance of the evening became a contest between the dance callers. The dance caller would get up there and start calling a pattern, and the next dance caller who was to take over from him was behind him, and he would just stop calling and walk away from the microphone, leaving the dancers in some odd state. And the other caller had to step in and unscramble them. And it was incredible fun for the callers, because they were always trying to create patterns that would screw up the next caller. And it was great fun for the dancers, who were really superb dancers, and they always enjoyed, being played with in that
Right.
manner. And I remember in those days there were so many people that came to the dancers that there wasn't enough room on the floor to dance, and it was a reasonably large hall. nice sprung wood floor and so forth. And they would do something that I've never seen since, and they would do double sets. That is, each girl would get another girl, and one would put an arm around the other, and so the girl on the right was the right hand, and the girl on the left was the left hand, and they would dance as a single unit. And then the boys did the same thing. So instead of having 8 people, you had 16 people.
Mm-hmm.
And they would dance in that fashion. And it was some of the most incredible patterns. And some of the best musicians were there and some of the best callers. And I ran into some of those people on the West Coast years later. One of the players, I believe, at that time was the guy who took over from Pete Seeger in the Weavers.
Hamilton?
Huh?
Frank Hamilton?
Well, Frank
or
took
Eric,
over third. It was Eric
Darling. Eric Darling,
okay.
Yeah.
And and so I knew Eric in New York briefly, and then when he settled in California, he came over the house all the time, and so I knew him there. There was a guy by the name of, I think, Smallwood. I'm trying to remember he was a black fellow who did an incredible imitation of Josh White. And I went to school at MIT, and one of the guys at MIT was into folk music, was the son of Trégère. And Trégère was one of the most famous and successful French ladies dress designer.
Okay.
And she had, one of these apartments on Fifth Avenue that took up three stories, and incredible house. And and we were friends with Jean-Pierre, and he used to have a Thanksgiving, a sing-along and party.
Huh?
And anybody who was anybody would come to the party, and his mother was always trying to get Jean-Pierre married, so she would always invite some of the most beautiful ladies who, exhibited her costumes to these parties. So the most gorgeous women in New York in this incredible apartment, and the liquor and the music flowed like water. And I remember one time I brought a bunch of friends, and we were sitting, must have been about midnight, and there was this guy, Clary Smallwood, I think it was. There was Clary sitting on the floor with his guitar, and Josh White sitting on the couch with a bunch of these gorgeous women wrapped around him with his guitar. And the two of them were swapping songs. And I remember Clary turned to Josh and said, no, you're doing it wrong, and started playing Josh White better than Josh White did.
Right.
Anyway, this was a crowd. I ran into that guy later. I think he was part of a singing group that had a number of limited success hits. I can't remember it all, but
Okay.
In any event, that was the crowd that I kind of grew up with. And I went to MIT, and at MIT I ran into a bunch of musicians and so forth. And in my sophomore year, in her freshman year, Peggy Seeger and Charlie Seeger and Barbara Seeger and Penny Seeger came to Cambridge because Peggy was entering Radcliffe. And about a year or two before, Ruth Crawford Seeger, her mother, who's famous for all of the children's songbooks, she had passed away. They were living in Chevy Chase. And they still had the house down there. And I remember that summer, Peggy invited myself and a good friend to spend the weekend down there. And I remember her house there, and two giant grand pianos that interlocked facing each other. And Charlie and Ruth Crawford used to play lieder songs from Germany, and that's where Pete and the whole family got exposed to Woody Guthrie and the whole crowd that used to march through that house. So Peggy had grown up in that environment and had a very formal music education, and she played about a dozen instruments. And I remember that weekend we were all having a wonderful lunch, and there was this 60-year-old black woman who was serving us lunch and everything, and she was the housekeeper. And as soon as we had almost finished our lunch, Peggy handed the housekeeper a guitar and begged her to play. And she played for about a half an hour. And it was, oh, God, just jumped out of my mind.
Ella Jenkins, wasn't it? Ella Jenkins?
No. Oh, jeez. I just popped out of my head.
Right.
It turned out years later, there was a skiffle group in England that picked up one of Peggy's songs and made millions singing Freight Train.
Uh-huh.
And Freight Train was originally this lady's, the black lady's. And Peggy and the family sued the guy, and this maid became multimillionaire almost overnight. And she then went on tour when she was about 70.
Uh-huh.
And you'd know her immediately if I...
I'm almost certain that was Ella Jenkins.
No, it was
And
not.
okay, all right.
I know the name, but it wasn't Ella.
Okay, well, then I have no idea.
Yeah, you God damn it. She was a left-handed guitarist, and she explained to us how she learned to play left-handed. The instrument was strung right-handed,
Mm-hmm.
and she said that it was her brother's guitar, and he would kill her if he knew that she was playing it. So she used to take it and sneak under the bed, and she'd be lying on her back, and the only way she could, finger it was backwards. But she never changed the string tunings. So her music always had incredible bass runs. And Freight Train was one of her top pieces.
Right.
In any event, Peggy was very active in the Boston area for 2 years, like her brother Pete, who went to Harvard for 2 years and ran out. After about 2 years of playing, and she led all kinds of groups up there. Anyway, the bottom line was there was a very active community, and she was very much part of it. And I remember I swapped her dance lessons for banjo lessons.
Mm-hmm.
So I taught her ballroom dancing, and she taught me banjo playing. And in her sophomore year, she decided she wanted to drop out of school. And so she basically wanted to make a record. And Jean-Pierre Radley was a graduate student at MIT, and a couple of the other folk musicians were also in electronics. So we practiced a lot, and I accompanied Peggy on about half the songs on her first record.
Right.
And we did the recording and the record in the MIT Acoustics Lab. And we made the record, and we pressed five. Mind you, we were all students at the time, so
Right.
we couldn't spend a lot of time in production. But we produced an incredible record with songs of courting and complaint. It was Peggy's first record. 500 copies were pressed from the original masters, and then we sold the masters to Folkways. And so to this day, Mo Ash still owes me a lot of money. Someday in any event, when Mo passed away and the Library of Congress took over his record collection, one of the Seegers, not Charlie, I can't remember, one of the Seegers became the director of Folkways.
Tony.
Tony, right.
Yes.
And Tony gave me my only pay ever from that record. He gave me a bumper sticker that said, "If you want to hear more of me, buy my Folkways album." So I have that bumper sticker on my banjo case. Anyway, that was the crowd I grew up in. It was very active, a lot of music, a lot of dance, a lot of contra dancing going on in New England. Absolutely just wonderful. And I graduated and had a job in California, and I came out to California, and it was a dead scene. There was hardly anything. There was McCabe's Guitar Shop in Santa Monica, and it's still there.
Right.
And I bumped into a bunch of people at one of the UCLA, I think, foreign students' lounge. They used to have Sunday night, once a month concerts, hootenannies.
Yeah.
So I went there. And through them, I met a bunch of people, and one of them was an entrepreneur who wanted to start a folk club. And so we all chipped in some capacity. I was just out of college and owed a lot of money, so I didn't have any money to contribute, but I contributed my labor, and I actually sang at the Ash Grove.
Okay, now what years are we at? Was this the late 50s now, around 19?
Now we're into 1958.
Okay, you're talking about your graduation from college as an undergraduate, right?
I graduated in 56.
Yeah. Okay, fine, okay.
And around that time, Peggy Seeger, who had been touring around the world, had come back, and her father, Charlie Seeger, had an appointment at UCLA, and he married one of his childhood sweethearts, whose husband had died and left a lot of money, and they had a big estate up in Santa Barbara.
Uh-huh.
And I remember at the time, Peggy came back from her tours around the world to try to put her mother's collection of music in some order.
Right.
And so she lived in one of the guest houses up on this massive estate up in Santa Barbara.
Uh-huh.
And during the week she was transcribing her mother's material and so forth. Subsequent to that, Peggy and her brothers and sisters made a recording of her mother's music, and I think you can look it up in the book somewhere.
Right.
I think it's Seeger Family or something like that. And I think they had all of the children from various marriages. He was married 3 times.
Right. And by the way, the woman was Elizabeth Cotten.
Yes, Elizabeth Cotten. You got it.
Yeah. I've been racking my brain trying to...
And it would have come to me eventually.
Yeah.
Yes, it was Elizabeth Cotten, and I got to hear her before she was famous, and she was incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely. She didn't have fingers, she had stubs, and she could play this incredible music. In any event, around that time, Peggy would every so often come down to L.A. and talk to, I think, her brother's booking agent, Leventhal, was in Santa Monica. So she would come in, I believe, every so often and discuss some of the history of the recordings at the time. And anyway, she'd come into L.A. and we'd have a lot of hootenannies, and it was a blast. And then she decided, why doesn't everybody come up to her place up in Santa Barbara and spend the weekend? So we did that about 2 or 3 times. We, like 20 or 30 of us would go up to this, this small guest house, and we would all kind of sleep on the floors, or in tents we would set up outside, and we just sang and played music for hours and hours and hours. And that kind of began to knit the community in Los Angeles. There was, and that was the genesis of the Ash Grove, which was the big folk club in L.A. for some 10 or 15 years. And that became the kernel of a bunch of people who always kind of knew each other and stayed together in some capacity or another. And when Peggy, I think, was here for a couple, 3 years, and then took off again, and then she married Ewan McCall, and she didn't come back to the country for another 30 years.
Right.
She's now living in Asheville.
Mm-hmm.
In any event, that community knew each other, and they supported the small concert stage at the Ash Grove, and I built their first PA system from a kit. I think it was a Heath kit or something like that, and did some singing there. I married, not Elaine. I married another woman, and that we had 3 children and not much music.
Mm-hmm.
And there wasn't hardly anything left. The Ash Grove and McCabe's, and that was about it.
And that was when, say, at what time period now?
You know, I would say from the early 1960s through the middle 1970s.
Okay.
The Ash Grove, I think, burnt down twice,
Mm-hmm.
and it got rebuilt. But that's about it. There really wasn't a lot. There were a lot of private parties around. It was kind of sad. A bunch of the old folkniks who now are, become middle-class people and would have a bunch of people sit around and have a cocktail party with a guitar player. And it wasn't what you would consider a vibrant community.
Right.
And I worked for one of the computer companies, and my job would take me back to the East Coast quite frequently. And my wife would come with me, and we would plan, okay, if we're going to be in Washington, then let's, on such and such a date, like Monday through Friday I would work, and we would go out on the prior Friday, and we would go to a festival on the weekends on either end, and then come home. And so we met a lot of people in the folk community.
Mm-hmm.
I became president of a singing group out here in L.A., which was the only kind of community of music, but it was very insular. That is, people sang because they were frustrated Hollywood types, and so they would go to people's house, and everybody would sit in a circle, and you'd do 1 or 2 songs, and people would practice for a month before they would come and play their 2 songs.
And we're now in the late 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. After the folk boom.
This was probably more in the early 70s.
Okay. Fine. Okay.
Those groups still exist.
Right. Okay.
And I got elected to be president, and so the first thing I did is I read the bylaws and found out we were violating our bylaws, and then I went and I started digging into the records and found that there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of unopened letters from folk societies around the country offering, to swap, or somebody was going to be traveling to L.A. and wanted to find out where the folk scene was or whatever it was. So it was that kind of a situation. And so I started, I was courting my wife at that time, my second wife, and we started opening some of these letters, and we were just absolutely shocked that nobody had ever corresponded. So we started sending out correspondences to these people and apologizing and introducing ourselves, and then we started swapping newsletters with them. And every time my job would take me somewhere in the United States, we'd contact one of the people who was one of the authors on one of the letters, and we would come and commiserate with them. We didn't go so much to their folk event as we went to meet them and understand what they were doing, and we kind of became a form of a virus.
Okay.
We would sit with them and they would tell us, they'd have a terrible problem with volunteers and blah, blah, blah. And we said, Vancouver does it this way, and
right.
maybe that would work here. And then we would see that they would do something quite innovative, and we would spread that to some other organization.
Now, I know that you've done this in the years prior to the Alliance's formation, but going back pre-CTMS, I'm interested in how this was pre-CTMS. Okay, fine. Okay.
This was pre-CTMS as well.
Okay, that's fine.
I then had a falling out with the people in this singing circle group because they, what I diagnosed was that they would get beginners, people who were interested in playing a guitar or an instrument of some form and singing a little bit. And these people would stay with them for 3 or 4 years, getting better and better and better on the instrument. And then there was no place for them to go, so they would drop out. And I was finding by studying the records on memberships that they had their greatest turnover with the best musicians. And I said, if a society loses its best, it doesn't last very long. So I started saying, we've got to introduce things that would keep the skilled musicians involved, give lessons, give concerts, have some way of reaching from the good musicians to the, the new people.
Right.
And there were lots of incredibly good musicians in the area. I ran into Eric Darling again at one of these things. But, he dropped out very quickly out of that kind of stuff. So after I had the falling out with the leaders who didn't have any interest in doing any of that, we left. And we stewed around what we might want to do. And we thought, there's got to be something better. And we started thinking of, what would be better. And we decided, well, we weren't interested in being in competition with the, these sing-alongs. And there was a very active community, or hundreds of people involved. And in every one of the communities in Los Angeles. So Los Angeles, if you're not familiar with it, is kind of an area city. It didn't go up; it went horizontal.
Right.
So there are communities, all 50 miles in diameter. There are little communities, they're kind of microclimates and microcultures, and that's Los Angeles. And so it turns out they would start one of these singing groups on one of the unoccupied weekends, like a Friday night or a Saturday night, in different parts of the city, and they would have leaders for those groups. And there were like a dozen of them all over the city going. And we said, well, that's good, that's fine, but we don't want to go in competition with that. Oh, my dog is driving me crazy here. Shush, shush. Shush. No. Not you. Him. No. Take your ball and go play somewhere else. So we started to think about it, and we talked. We would know a number of musicians, and they would, from time to time, appear at UCLA, or they would show up at McCabe's or something like that, and we got to chat with them. Some of them would stay with us. I know when Peggy and you and McCall were traveling, they always stayed with us for a while, and we would chat with them about what's it like on the road, and why aren't there more musicians here and so forth. And the basic answer we got was there really wasn't any place for musicians to play, and if they did come to the West Coast, they went to San Francisco and turned right. And they would bypass the Southern California, which was viewed as a great wasteland. And mostly because the musicians, unlike on the East Coast, if you drove from Washington to Boston, which is about 300 miles?
Roughly.
Yeah. That's not quite two-thirds of the way between L.A. and San Francisco.
Right.
But if you drove from Washington to Boston, you could probably have 50 gigs.
Right.
There were places all along the way. Not so in California. And when a musician who doesn't get paid a lot of money anyway, a folk musician, he has to work, and he has to play at a lot of places so he can earn a decent wage and sell his records or whatever else he's going to do. And so a musician going from Washington to Boston probably took 2 months to do that and worked every night.
Right.
In L.A., you might get a gig out at McCabe's, and then your next gig was in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And how did you get to San Francisco? If you rented a car and drove, then you had a week that you had to eat, go to motels, and then you'd perform at a place that would be roughly equivalent to what you do on the East Coast.
Right.
So it was very hard for musicians to make any money. And we recognized this, and we said, no. And so we said, okay, here's a place we can do something. We had a big house, a large home. We had 6 children between us. And so we had a 5-bedroom house and a giant living room and a giant den. And we decided, okay, we're going to try to offer an alternative to McCabe's. McCabe's was getting a little aloof. They would only hire, the names, the big names that would fill up their small auditorium. And so we said, if we filled up our living room and den, and they're kind of right angles, we could almost put as many people in as McCabe's could. They had about 165. So we decided, okay, we're going to try it. And we started holding concerts in our home. And as far as I know, it was the first time I had ever, heard of house concerts. Idea spread since all over the world.
Sure.
I don't claim that we were the first, but I was saying it was an innovation that we invented locally that took off.
It was new to you.
It was new to us, and we were corresponding by this time with 500 different folk societies around the United States.
Okay.
All those unopened letters became opportunities to continue correspondence.
Right.
And so we started running these concerts in our home. And we started to get some of the best musicians, not because they knew who the hell we were, but we knew who they were.
Right.
By reading all these 500 newsletters, we knew who was traveling where and what kind of music they did. And we would read the reviews afterwards that people would publish in their little newsletters. So we knew who was, really good but not well known. And we offered them an opportunity to perform in the house.
Right.
John McCutcheon, for example, was not well known, and John performed for us almost year in and year out for years.
Right.
And not only that, but people would crowd to hear this strange instrument that he played, a hammered dulcimer. What the hell is that?
Yes.
And and so we would have workshops the following Sunday,
Okay.
and we would have dozens of hammered dulcimers stretched out in the den, and he would have a 2-hour workshop, and so it was good for him, it was good for us, and people wanted to learn. And
You'd, in a sense, create multiple income streams in your one stop. Then I guess he'd get workshop tuition, we'll call it, or fees plus a concert fee. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, we charge for the concerts and we charge for the workshop.
And so John could.
And all the money went to the artist.
Right. Okay, I understand. Sure.
I think we might have held out a little bit to pay for the refreshments.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I did sound and wired up the house, and then we started a program amongst people. It was very expensive to advertise these concerts, and we were doing like 1, sometimes 2 a month.
Okay.
We decided to split the year in half years, and we would have concert series.
Okay.
So people could buy at a discount of about 10%.
Okay.
They could buy the whole series.
Right.
And there were like 6 or 7 concerts in the series. And then we would sell the single seats that were not sold in series. For some of our series, there weren't any free seats. People respected our choices and knew that the programs we were going to offer were quite diverse, so that they would buy the whole series, almost unheard of, though
Right.
we published a newsletter. We did this primarily to run the series because then we could make 2 mailings a year and not have to have 12 or 15, because we would advertise the whole series in one newsletter.
Right.
And that saved money, and money flowed into the coffers of the artist rather than pay for expenses. And in the process of doing this, we started all kinds of artists who today are kind of legend, who were not known at the time. Sally Rogers started with us, and if Elaine was here, she would rattle off more names because she was the organizer of most of that.
Okay.
Who's the guy who lives in the Northeast up near Maine? Who?
Gordon Bach?
No, he dresses like a cowboy and does all the cowboy songs.
Oh, I don't know. I might know the name if I heard it, but I don't know.
He did. The Animal Farm or something.
No, I'm not. I don't know.
Anyway, he was a great success here and so forth. And so we had these concerts, and that was what was going on. And we would have quite a diversity. We would have singing and musicians who played and sang, comedy, singing songs, like the Berrimans did shows here.
Mm-hmm.
And we would then bring in other artists for other areas. We would have old-timey, and we hit a nerve because there were a lot of old-timey musicians in the area who suddenly started coming out for all the old-timey stuff. And we would then have, some Irish musicians. The McKennas played here for years, and Mick Maloney and his various bands would come by. We would have Scottish and Welsh harpists, and so people just, we anytime we would mail out the flyer, we'd sell out within a few days to the same collection crowd, an expanding crowd of hundreds and hundreds of people, and our mailing list started growing. And then the people started clamoring, hey, this is great, but I'd like to learn more about a hammered dulcimer or a fretted dulcimer. Oh my God, what a beautiful instrument. Where can I get lessons?
Mm-hmm.
and that became a kind of a buzzword that was kind of a joke after a while. In addition, when we would try to get certain musicians to come, they would raise the problem that, they could make a reasonable income in L.A. for the one night
right.
at our place, but but then they had this big 500-mile openness to get to San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
So that led my wife to thinking about it. And on the West Coast, there's a tradition that goes back to the original Spanish settlers. Junipero Serra is one of the famous friars.
Mm-hmm.
And what he did was he built a church and a community 1 day's journey up the coast. And so if you look at the missions in California from San Diego up into Northern California,
Okay.
there's a mission roughly every 30 miles.
Okay.
And this was the Route 1. And and they built these missions 1 day's journey so that people could stop. And we decided, hey, that's a good idea. Why don't we find house concerts 1 day's journey up the coast?
Right.
And so if somebody performed on a Saturday night in L.A., they could actually have a couple gigs in San Francisco on Friday and Saturday and maybe even Sunday. But what are they going to do Monday through Thursday? And so we started looking for places. And I remember there were some people up in Ojai that we knew used to come to our concerts. And they said they had a nice women's club that could hold about 200. And they were interested. So they came down and we had a big meeting and we fed them lunch and we befriended them. And then when they left with a whole bunch of amplifiers and old microphones and a few stands that I had that I didn't need anymore. And we upgraded our equipment. And they started the Ojai concerts, which still run today. And then we got to Santa Barbara and we set up concerts there. And then above Santa Barbara, we went to San Luis Obispo, Linnea's, the coffee house, and they still have concerts there. And so we located, dozens of house concerts all the way up so that